Hey neighbors, thanks for joining us today. We are so thankful, gratitude, honored, privileged. Thank you very much. We love doing these. We're Huntington Matters, and we're going to be doing our first candidate interview of the 2025 season. And it is with Dr. Dave BENNARDO, who's currently a town council member and running for re-election for the primary.
Yes.
So this election is the primary for the Republican Party members, the Conservative Party members, and Working Party members. And you have to be registered, and the primary is June 24th. And the results of this primary, who wins these, is going to be the candidates that are on your ballot in November for these parties. So it's very important that you get out and vote, get to know your choices, right? And we have quite a few. It's a very active,
active campaign season.
Active campaign season for the primary. And we don't usually have this much action. Actually, I think this is our very first primary interviews we've ever done in 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. So we're going to dive right in because we're going to try and keep this to 45 minutes, hopefully.
Okay.
And so thank you very much, Dave, for joining us.
My pleasure.
So getting to know you, we're going to start with tell us about yourself and why you decided to step forward to serve our community as a town council member.
I have always been in service because I consider being a principal in superintendent service.
First one, just lift your hand up for a second. Just goes under here.
Okay.
Diane's over there probably like, what's going on? I don't hear anything. Now it should be better, Diane. Sorry. Okay, great. Sorry, go ahead. Continue. So public service.
Public service is, it's in the blood. You know, my parents were educators and administrators, and so that's kind of, we just believe in serving. And when I retired as a school superintendent, so I served 10 years as a principal, 10 as a school superintendent, actually 9, and right here in Huntington, between Harbor Hills and South Huntington. So when I retired, actually both parties poked around with interest a little bit, which I thought was actually pretty cool. And I decided to continue my service this way if the people would have me.
That's awesome. So did you, both parties pursued you? Does that mean that you voted like not party lines all your whole life?
I've been
like a person, not party.
Yes, I've been quite independent all of my life, and usually go for the person, not the party. But even more importantly, I think I suffer from being able to see both sides of most issues. So it's good for understanding, but it's tough because you don't fit into any dogma or any specific cubbyhole that I think people think we're supposed to fit into. So I kind of sometimes make both sides happy and sometimes tick off both sides.
I gotcha. We're unicorns, you and I.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. All right. So what have you accomplished in your elected position over the last 4 years or work experience that you are most proud of that directly benefits our community? And just a comment, when we gathered the questions this year, a neighbor said, I feel like all I hear about is the development projects, and that overshadows everything else.
You know, that's actually a great comment because when you think about it, 97% of the town is developed. There's really only about 3% open but owned land that can be developed. Yet it seems to overpower everything else. And typically what we do is not terribly dramatic or terribly sexy. It's roads, beaches, garbage, highways, things like that. And so it's not as dramatic as people would love, but it's the things when you think about it that really do affect your life every day. The problem is doing it at a manageable rate that doesn't strangle people financially. And so probably my most proud accomplishment is that we've been able to deliver those services and pave more roads than we ever had, bring in special needs playgrounds and things like that without busting the bank, without breaking the tax cap, as most, I think we're only one of 2 towns that didn't bust the tax cap.
Yeah, that's
so
pretty amazing.
There's some pride in being able to do things efficiently because we know people are struggling.
Yeah, that's actually a very big deal that we didn't pierce the tax cap, and we were, because as we all know, the cost of everything has gone up so much.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. All right, great. So if you could snap your fingers and guarantee an improvement to the town of Huntington, what would you choose and why? And this is no repercussions. You ready? So magic wand time.
Honestly, it would be affordability. It would be the ability to deliver the services we're delivering without having to raise people's taxes. And I know that's an impossibility, so you try to raise them as least amount as you can. But if we could continue to deliver, if we could continue to have clean beaches and good roads, and we could do it in a way that was a zero, we could deliver the public a zero tax increase. That would be truly incredible, and that would be my I would ask that genie for that one wish.
Yeah. All right, great. And what projects or goals are at the top of your list that you want to accomplish this term?
I think that one of the reasons I actually chose to run again was the Melville Overlay District. I made some promises to myself and to the public during that debate. And one of my promises was it would be done in a way that doesn't hurt the school districts. It would be done in a way that doesn't bring in 40,000 apartments and some of the things that are out there. So I want to be a watchdog of those things. I want to fulfill those promises, which means at times I'm going to upset people. I'm going to upset people that have projects because I have there are a couple of acid tests absolutes if you're going to get a project by me. But I want to be in that spot to make sure that that we deliver on the things we said we'd do, and we deliver on them with the promises we made.
That's great. That's like really tons of integrity there. Because sometimes it's a lot easier to go, you know what, this is too difficult, running around knocking on everybody's doors and running a campaign again, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
That's
doing
really
that for
important.
us.
That's the one thing that, like I said, that has to be.
Yeah.
If we're going to have any credibility, forget as elected officials, but if we're going to look our own families in the eyes.
Very good. All right, what would you never want to see changed from what it is now in this town? That was an interesting new question.
I wouldn't want to see the suburban character of the town changed. And by that I mean, beautiful Huntington downtown, beautiful Northport Harbor. You can go around, beautiful streets and blocks in Dix Hills, the quaintness of harbor fields. So, and certainly you could talk about every town has its special, every community has its special. I wouldn't want that suburban, that quaint feeling, because we managed to have 220,000+ residents but still seem small and quaint. That's something that I never want to see changed. And if you're not careful, the desire for progress could bring you to change that.
Yeah, like bulldozing an entire town in the 60s for urban development.
Exactly right.
That's why we have such a giant commuter parking lot, because that used to actually be a village.
And it used to be what people thought they were doing the right. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure their intentions were good, but you have to jealously guard against what we have. The reason it's so expensive to live here is because of what we have. It's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah, we are definitely very blessed for sure. And a lot of that is because of the stewardship of the prior administrations and prior neighbors who have stepped up to lead this town. So something to consider for sure. All right, let's talk about influence. What is the job description, just because we always like to do a little civics lesson. What is the job description of a town council person, and what is the town council exclusively responsible for? And this is outside of the supervisor. This is just the 4 town council members.
We're basically responsible for the policy that drives delivery of services. So it's a very unique structure in that while Supervisor Smyth is the supervisor, unlike in a school district where the school board has a certain amount of votes and the superintendent works for him or her, we have 5 equal shares in voting. Yeah. So Ed is charged with running the operation without any more influence than anyone else on the board. So it's a unique challenge. And so our responsibility is to make sure policy is directed in a way that services that are delivered, the services rendered to people, are hitting those basic quality of life issues. So what would you say? I hear all the time about roads. Roads are very important to people, and although Andre's fantastic, we've got to make sure he's getting the money he needs and the support he needs and the people he needs to deliver. I hear about beaches all the time, and people want to make sure that our beaches are maintained, and I hear about parks all the time. Yeah. So those are the things that come up regularly, and our biggest operation is sanitation. And really, if you look at it, that's something that hits everybody at least twice a week. You interact with that service directly, and tons and tons of refuse every day. And it goes further. It goes actually to things like you wouldn't even imagine, like what we're going to do with the ash. Everybody thinks of that, but how is John Clark selling aluminum, on the commodities market? What are we doing to?
So that's how it works?
Yeah, John. It's a very deep, complex office, and
Wow.
and of course we can't do that with most things.
Right.
But
So
with
we
John,
don't sell it like as a giant thing to another company and let them do whatever they want with it.
John uses, obviously we have a relationship with Covanta, but John comes from Wall Street. He has that background, so he's always looking for ways. Can we capitalize on what we're doing in an investment market? Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, and maybe he never has, but he's always searching for that, and that's a very important piece to know. So that, and the things I just told you, you said that's what you do, and that kind of is the reaction with people. And
I'm surprised. Like, when you were running for this to begin with, did you have any idea that's what it was going to end up being?
No, I had no idea the depths of what John does. He tries to figure out what we're going to do with the ash. I had no idea of. I knew parks because I had been an aquatics director and years ago in another life in Oyster Bay, and I knew beaches, but I had no idea what went into roads. I had no idea what went into what John does to refuse and to recycling and how we can work with groups. I had no idea of that. So what happens is it's not terribly dramatic, and sometimes because it's not dramatic, I think that local officials get out of their lane. And when they get out of their lane, you damage your credibility and your ability to deliver on the local services. What do I mean? When I was a superintendent, my lane was not immigration. It was not who came here. When they came here, I educated who came here. So I was constantly being pushed for an opinion on immigration. And my answer, no one knew what party I was when I was a superintendent. And my answer to people was, if I start jumping into that thing over which I have zero control and zero input, I'm damaging my ability to do the things I am here to do. So I think that we have to be very careful on in local official office to not leave our lane. Now you see county executives across the country that they really dive into heavy duty political issues that are really national issues or state issues. I think we have to deliver the services and stay out of those things. And sometimes I'm criticized for my silence on those things, but it's by design. It's not because I don't have an opinion.
Right.
It's because my job is to represent the 220,000 residents, and to alienate a piece of them and to lose a piece of my credibility because I'm delving into something that they don't. Let's be honest, they don't really care in the White House what I think, nor do they care at the Capitol what I think.
Right. And you don't have influence. And
I'm not that important. Yeah. And I always remind myself of that. So. I think that's very important. Stay in our lane. Our lane is services. Now, the one thing that gets hot is, and I know we'll get into it, is housing and development. And that's the one thing where you do end up dividing people up. But no one comes to the microphone about how we're handling recyclables. They don't.
True.
Right? No one comes to the microphone.
Actually, there's a lot of people think that, oh no, we don't really recycle. It just all goes the same way.
Yeah.
No, John does a lot of great things. And again, I truly don't understand three-quarters of them.
Interview him, right?
He would be fantastic.
We have to do an interview.
He would be fantastic. The things he does.
Give us a tour and stuff.
Yes, he loves to give a tour.
Oh!
Yeah, no, he loves that. Yeah, he's bright. He's, like I said, I happen to have had his kids in school, so we've known each other he's an amazing family. But John's a very sharp person. So those are the important things, and those are council jobs. It's almost as close a level of government to the people as you can get, probably other than schools. Schools are probably the closest because everybody's kids use your service.
Yeah, great. So now that you are a council member, what skills and experience do you think would make a candidate a really good council member? Just to talk to people who may be considering it for the future.
I think the ability to not get overly impressed with yourself. I make sure that I remind myself that I'm here because the people put me here. I'm not here to make grandiose national policy. I'm not here because I, deserve a police escort where I go. I'm a regular dude who, wants to deliver for the local residents because I love this place. And so I think it's the ability to do that, the ability to say what you mean and then follow through. One of the things that residents, when I was campaigning, were very frustrated over last time was they felt that they would call town hall and it would go into a black hole of calls.
Yes, agreed.
So I give out my cell number.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to look far. It's on everything I put out, my personal cell. And, you know, after 4 rings, it goes on to my cheapest day floor carry if I don't pick up. And so, you know, and that's everything. Every single person who wants to call. Now, I always tell people, if you don't get a text or a call back from me, I missed it. Call me again. In other words, it's not on purpose. Try again and don't badger me.
Yeah.
For example, recently I had some questions on a particular issue, so I sent a letter out. And I put my cell number on the bottom, and I got about 40 or 50 calls over a 2-week period. And it gave me the ability to connect with people. I'm uncomfortable knocking on people's doors during dinner. It's just not my custom of connecting. I like letting you connect with me. And in the schools, I did that by going to every single event. And every single event. And that's, you know, in the bleachers of a basketball game. Even now, I try to go to all the school events. I try to go to town events. That's where you hear what's going on. It's not at a formal appointment in your office.
Yeah,
but
true.
it's, you know, I was trying to put a deck on my house, and this permit process drove me nuts. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
You know, we met the other day with the, there's a senior affordable housing complex called The Club in Melville. So it's Costco, then it's 2 developers behind Costco. So it goes Costco, Country Point, Avalon. Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
And in that half hour, you know, we found out what was important. Over cookies. We brought a thing of cookies, and we found out what was important to them, problems they were having, things that they thought were really good. So to me, that's the job. That's the skill is, are you willing to get out there and listen and follow through?
Yeah, and you're not honestly going to learn if you stay in your office.
Yep. Or if you don't like what you hear sometimes. You see, I think a lot of leaders don't, they want to, the most dangerous thing you could do is surround yourself with people in an echo chamber, right? Because then you're hearing what you want to hear, but, you know, maybe someone should raise their hand and say, hey, boss, maybe there aren't weapons of mass destruction. You know, well, I always say to people, at some point, you want someone on the other side of the table saying, you know, Dave, I think you might be off base on this, or actually, you're wrong, we don't do the following.
Right.
And that's important to know.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. What is the town council's, we just touched on the development, what is the town council's influence over development, planning, zoning, and projects in the town of Huntington? So we put this in every interview because people think that the town board or the supervisor has sole control
Right.
over whatever ugly they don't like going on related to any kind of a building project. So,
you know, the first thing to understand is there are certain things that what are called as of right, which simply means you're on the property. There are no laws or rules against it. You're allowed to do it. And, you know, people may not like that, but I'll get calls and I'll say he or she owns the property. You know, they're within their rights to paint the house pink, you know, or obviously that's not a real one, but it could be.
There's one in my neighborhood.
Right? And that's really the American way. I mean, you own the property. However, when do we get involved? We get involved when you're asking for a change in the zoning or a variance. So, for instance, R40 means an acre zone. And what happens is you look at this acre and a quarter and you say, you know what, I could put 2 houses here. It's all half acre around the neighborhood. You know, can we get this to R20? Can we bring it down? And that's when we weigh in. Now, obviously, that's a very small scale, but we weigh in, but then it has to go to the planning department, all right, and the planning board. These are experts in suburban planning and their job.
Does it go to them first before you when you're dealing with the zone change?
In most cases, it goes first to planning. Yep. And then, and it can go back and forth 4 or 5 times.
Right.
So that board's job, there are 2 different things. There's a department and the board. The board are citizens. And, you know, Paul Ehrlich is our planning board chairman, and he has a certain view of planning and what fits in a neighborhood. And then the planning department are experts truly in planning. You know, this is what they do.
Right.
And together they get to a place where we look at a project and we say, all right, is this something that's doable? Now, then you have to talk about grander developments. I just gave you some very easy ones, but there are only about 7 or 8 parcels in this town, and I'm making that number up, but it's not more than 10.
Yeah.
That are open for large development. So really,
And what's
really,
the definition of large?
I mean, being able to more than 3-4 acres. Really,
Right.
we're down to just a handful, and
Yeah.
there's a on I probably know where each one is on Pulaski Road behind where I used to live on Greenbrush Court by the Greek Church. There's I believe a 20-something acre parcel.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
It was a horse farm owned by a parent of mine at Harborfields, the Pizzonias. And it could be less than 20, but it's big. And then there's Park Shore Day Camp, which
Right.
is running as a day camp now.
It is?
Yes, and it's running beautifully
Did
as
they
a day
sell?
camp. No, it's a day camp. It's running, and they're happy with the day camp.
So they ended up
No,
not selling?
yet
Park
I
Shore?
get calls daily that what's the plan for Park Shore? He's running a camp right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
He just was seeking zoning.
I think he was
as an
just.
option
I think he
for the
was just
future?
floating ideas out there. I think.
That's what Oakwood Nursery did.
I guess they floated just. And
So
so
they
we went.
got, it was probably, I don't know, like 8 years ago that
Okay.
they put it in for their nursery property to be alternatively zoned as R20, I guess. So that when they retired, their kids didn't want the business.
There was
that's
some
what
value
they're
to
doing.
it.
So now it's as of right, it's being built into, single family homes
Sure.
over there. But
And
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Then there's the old. I don't know what the name of it is now. The old Villadon property. So really, there were just this limited. There were.
And then that has a big challenge with the sand pits on it.
Big
too,
time,
but-
and then there's Snyder's Farm. Schneider's, yep. So and when I tell you, there's like 6 or 7. There are like 6 or 7, and that's it. And what happens is, people who own properties like this, they want to maximize what they're making per acre.
Right.
And so what a person will pay is based on how much yield they can get per acre. So obviously, if it's R40, if it's acre zoned, they'd rather it, quarter acre zone. So then they could say you could put 4 houses on each, and then the community would rather, in most cases, many cases, not most, that it stay as of right, it stay acre zoned. So we're in that constant battle because we do want housing, we do want to help people, but by the same token, people do have a right to, I'm the type of person I'll look at, if there's a benefit to it, I'll look at one downside in zoning. I'll look at, but to me, when you jump, and someone out there, some developer out there is probably daggering me right now, but when you jump 4 or 5 steps and 4 or 5
from 1 acre to a quarter of an
yes,
acre.
yep. When you
Yeah.
do that, you do change the integrity of a neighborhood.
Definitely.
And I also like to look around the area and see, are there quarter acre houses there? And typically not. Maybe there are half acre houses there. So there are these competing interests. There's yield, and which is a financial interest. There's more housing, which is a housing interest. And then there's preservation of neighborhood character. So you're constantly in that yin and yang. And everybody's sure that they represent the majority on both sides of that all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody's sure. And usually development's a good idea as long as it's not near you. And so typically the setting starts with, I'm not against a project like this, but it's in the wrong place, or I'm not against a project like this, but I hate the way it's being done. Those are kind of the two things you hear, and I try at least to listen to all of those things, and I'm very quiet when I listen, and it's not a disinterest, but I like to listen and get informed and educated about something before I come to an opinion.
Yeah, gotcha. Great, thank you. All right, so we did touch on this already, but how do you currently foster transparency and involve residents in your decision-making process? So number 1 is you give out your personal cell phone and you put no barriers between people accessing you.
No, I'm an over-communicator. I'm an over-communicator by nature. I mean, the joke in
I like that. I'm using that.
the joke in the school district was that they hear me on their answering machine more than they heard their relatives.
My husband misses you.
and I'm an open door person.
Every time it snows, he's like, "Where's Dr. Bernardo?" I miss my morning call.
And I'll go to Green Lawn Family Restaurant with anyone who wants to sit down and I was at a town event, and Karen Steinhaus came over and said, Dave, these poles haven't been painted. And she was right, So that's the job. I ended up sitting down with at Green Lawn Family Restaurant, you know, with another group of people. And so that's kind of the role. So I think you foster transparency by being open and available and listening. And you foster it by not cornering yourself into positions that could ultimately make people think that you already have a preconceived decision or notion. And even when people don't agree with me, I think they typically understand that I'm listening, and I do feel their pain. I do understand, you know. And when I don't know something or I make a mistake, I have no problem admitting it. So I think you foster transparency by never being rude to the public, by letting people have their say. I mean, some of the stuff that, you know, people do is kind of embarrassing because we don't want our children to act like that. But when we say we're doing it in the name of politics, it somehow becomes telling it like it is instead of just rude. But the bottom line is that you foster transparency by developing trust and developing communication.
That's great. And that leads us into the next question, which is, if you win, what would you do to help rebuild unity and harmony on the town board? And I honestly don't know if I can remember a prior town board that has been dealing with such division right now.
You know,
I mean, it was pretty rough during Chad's time here and there.
Yes.
With the board, because of the decision making was kind of like stymied because they were pretty equally numbered.
Yes.
Right? So that was a little challenging, but they had challenges with that, not for the public. But this is getting...
I think, you know, you'll notice that I will never send out a piece of campaign material that talks about anything but myself. Right. I don't play in those reindeer games of, you know, that person's a criminal, Look, I ran 3.5 years ago against Jen Hebert and Joe Schramm. They're both wonderful people.
I know, you guys...
I mean, we ended up friends.
Was a very lovely campaign.
And, you know, if I'm blessed enough to run against Jen again, I mean, we're going to treat each other like human beings. And so I think you restore unity, or at least civility, by acting civil and, you know, by not getting into that mud. And, you know, look, Joan Sergel was on the other side of the aisle. I loved working with Joan. We worked as friends. We communicated regularly. We still text. She still knows when I have a bad day and shoots me a text. It's just that's civility. That's the way this is supposed to go. It shouldn't be a blood sport. I don't know why. I have my own theories on why, but it's turned into a blood sport now. You know, honestly, primarily between Ed and Brooke. That's really what's happened. And but I don't think most of us share in that blood sport. So I think that it's going to be okay. I think that when this is over, we're going to be able to say to everybody, look, it's done. Let's shake hands. Whoever wins in November wins. And let's go on and do the people's business, because this is embarrassing.
Yeah.
This is not what we want our kids to see.
Like, we're like wondering, even as a result of this primary, how are you going to go back to work?
It's challenging.
Because somebody's not going to be happy.
Yep. And you have to. But, you know, the answer is because you have to.
You have to.
And you know,
you have to figure out a way to make it work.
If Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill could get along like they did, you know, they fought till 5 o'clock and went out to dinner at 6 o'clock, you know. and if we've got to do that. We've got to get past this. The big thing in politics now is to make your opponent a villain. And we see it nationally, but now we're seeing it locally in the town, and I've never seen anything like this. And then what happens is that attitude then goes to the public, and you get people at the microphone saying and doing things that are just not civil. And I think we're better than that.
I agree.
So I'm committed to whoever wins. I'm committed to. Well, I don't know if I'll win, right? But I'm committed, if I happen to be fortunate to get on, I'll work with whoever it is, and it is we shouldn't be, you know, it shouldn't be the middle school cafeteria table. You know, you don't not sit next to someone because you're angry with them. You just don't do that. That's not, you got to suck it up and you got to work with whoever it is.
Yeah.
And my other thing is, it's almost like a marriage. Don't say things you can't take back.
True.
You know, I'm very careful when I'm competing to not say things you can't take back, because those things hurt forever. Stick to the issues. You know, and like I said, I'll go back to my last campaign. Jen and I stuck to the issues. Joe and I stuck to the issues, and we were able afterwards to shake hands and you know, and to move on. And if in fact they had won, good people would be on the town board. You know, I always knew that. So I think that you know, I think that we've got a responsibility to act that way, and I'm committed to it.
And I think we really as neighbors, we have a responsibility to show up at the polls and vote for what's important to us.
Yep.
Because if you don't vote, then, you're not going to get what's a real reflection of what the community really wants and needs.
And you
because
can't
you're
reward.
not showing up.
Yep, and you can't reward. I think we have to be very careful as an electorate about rewarding negativity.
Right.
Because what's going to happen is then that's what you're going to get.
Correct.
If it's effective, that's what you're going to
Correct.
get. So if calling you a criminal or calling you a communist or calling you a fascist, if that works, that's what we're going to see from now on at the local level. This is a new low that we're seeing now, and I really don't think it's reflective of who we are.
Agreed. Okay, so next is housing and development, the giant elephant,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't really an elephant. So it's the number one question that was submitted in this round of campaign questions from the community. What can the candidates do to bring in more workforce and affordable housing and reduce the growth of luxury housing? There is way more need and demand for affordable and market rate housing in our town.
Okay, and we kind of touched on it before.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge of affordability, and I'm not talking about affordable housing, but affordability in housing,
We're talking about like really what you can spend.
is that it's supply and demand. So Huntington house prices are bizarre. I mean, I think my daughter paid $750,000 for a small 3-bedroom house, right? House prices are crazy. But they're crazy because people want to live here and there's not a high supply.
Right.
So the only way you increase supply, because there's no land left, is building up, and no one likes to build up. Right? So, or you decrease demand, which means make it not a nice place. Pardon the double negative. So that's the danger, I mean, you can get a house real cheap in Appalachia, right?
Yeah,
so
but nobody wants to live
that's the catch-22. Now, with that said, there are places that can handle more dense housing, and those are places that are already office buildings, and that's where the whole Melville idea came from, in that, let's have, not 40,000 apartments and all those things.
Never 40,000 apartments.
No, but let's have what I call first step housing, or I used to see final step housing, but I don't want to be in a final step ever. But first,
How old are we?
yeah, I don't use it anymore. But like my son and his fiance, one's a teacher, one's a nurse, so they do okay.
Yeah,
but
so they should be able
to find an
something.
affordable apartment, they had to go to Rockville Center. So my point is,
and you would think that west of us is so much more expensive.
Yeah, there was nothing here.
Than we are. Wow.
But so to me, that Melville area, places that already have 3 stories, they're office buildings. You're not paving over the Pine Barrens. You're not those places.
The
that
parking lots we did drive by.
Yes.
We drove through. We took a video because I had to have it for perspective for myself. Because what are we talking about here? And they're literally the parking lots from the Huntington Quadrangle that used to have 4-foot tall weeds growing in the cracks of the pavement.
So that's where I view first step housing, I call it, so
like entry level.
Yes, and it's not going to be, nothing's going to be inexpensive in Huntington, and like I said, you don't want it to be inexpensive because you don't want, that means your house is less, but it'll be more accessibility, more people, supply will increase, and then where do you go when you retire? You don't want to go a 55 and over community, but you don't want to go to Florida because you want to be by your kids, so that opens then more affordable houses up because those people move into a place like that. So really, that was my reason for eventually voting yes, because I didn't know how I'd vote, to be honest, the whole time on Melville.
Really?
And I had no idea. I was quiet, and first step housing, more keeping our young people here, more affordable, late step housing, we'll call it, and then that opens up homes that then supply of homes increases. Yes,
home opportunities.
and that's the key. And so that really was the genuine, the genuine truth behind it. That really was the genuine intent behind it, was to do that. And I'm hoping that, and that's one of the reasons I'm staying on the, if I'm blessed to stay on the board, because I want to see that happen.
Yeah. So, and then the affordable situation. I have been taught, of course, we have friends from other towns, and as community leaders, we just talk about affordable crisis in their towns, and all that. And everyone remarks how unique Huntington is that we have that 20% affordable set aside, where when you're building a project under certain parameters, 20% of the units have to be affordable, which then ends up becoming workforce housing because affordable is not the right name for the formula.
It's certainly not the right name for the formula. Not when you look at what's
but that's a federal situation, not ours. But
when you think about it,
now you're talking about say it's fully built at 1,500 units, housing units, because it's supposed to be different types, right? Ownership, rental, condo, right?
Yep.
20% of that is
affordable, and then
number.
Even the others, if a senior citizen leaves their 3-bedroom cape and moves into them, that happens more, right?
Oh, right.
Then there's more houses on the market. So I mean, that's the hope. That really is the hope.
Right. Okay. Great. All right. All the candidates have stated that they are against developing, but also have stated that they're in favor of creating housing for seniors and young adults who can't afford to stay in Huntington. What is your plan to accommodate both interest groups? We discussed that because we have
exactly it.
Polar opposites going on.
And
I don't know that there's an easy answer for that.
There isn't. It has to be in places that you can't plop a large housing, and even the whole word housing, you can't plop a large set of living units in the middle of a suburban block with single-family homes. It's just, we have to be wise with a lot of times it's redevelopment, not even development.
Yeah,
we have to be wise in redeveloping. Our country's changing. People aren't going back to offices. So there's a chance to redevelop areas to provide housing without hurting the character and integrity of a single-family block. And that's really what we have to do. So I'll never say I'm against development. I have some personal biases against, multi-family units in the middle of suburban blocks. I just think that doesn't fit.
Right.
But I would say wise development rather than no development.
So there was a late entry question from Matt Harris on our board who was curious, and I really wasn't going to put it because it's not relevant to everybody, but being that you're already there, you're an incumbent. He wanted to know if you think there's ever going to be a chance for the basement accessible dwelling units to come back up into conversation again.
I don't see it now. There's no appetite for it right now.
Right.
So I would say no.
Because that was about, when talking to
3 years
Joe
ago.
Rose, I think he was saying it totals about 400 units in the town. 300 to 400 units of housing.
Yep.
But there was a load that were grandfathered.
A load that are grandfathered, and probably a load that are just happening that we don't even know about.
Well, yeah, there was that too. Right.
But there was concerns over safety, and there were things that we just couldn't answer some of those questions, and I'm glad the questions came up. But we couldn't answer many of the questions about how we would handle that.
All right, there you go, Matt. Okay. The next one is open space. How can we preserve more open space, the little bit that we have left, while simultaneously addressing our housing needs?
I think that anytime a developer comes to us, first of all, there are times we can just preserve, like Stanhope Sables. We can just make sure that,
that worked out really
we
well.
put and even though I'm a bit of a libertarian and I'm like putting my government hand on the scale, in that case, putting your hand on the scale for the greater good of keeping a horse farm and keep it, that was worth it.
Yeah, that worked out.
But in addition, when a developer comes to us, we do hold a lot of the cards. And, we can't tell them what to do.
We meaning
the town board. We can't tell them what to do, but we can vote no. So a lot of what I believe in doing is saying, okay, what are you going to give the community in terms of green space, in terms of community pool, in terms of a park? So here are your X amount of acres. What are you ready and willing to give back to the people who are going to have this in their neighborhood? And I think that's the way we can increase some of the green spaces.
Right, like a CBA, community benefit.
Exactly right. There's got to be.
They did with the Gateway Plaza.
Yeah. What are we getting back for it for the people?
Right. Exactly.
You want this zone change, okay?
Right.
what are the people getting back for me considering this zone change?
Right.
Rather than to just be welfare for a developer.
Gotcha.
You know?
Very good. Very good. And if I'm not mistaken, we're going to get to some Melville Town Center breakdowns, but in the Melville Town Center framework for that overlay district is. Am I wrong to say that is open space a requirement?
Yeah, there's a certain
of
percentage open
each
space. Yep.
project?
I forget the complete number, but there's a
Right,
certain
so they
requirement of
can't
open
be, like,
space.
just
Yep.
built out to every
Absolutely.
square inch. Okay, good to know. Okay, revitalization. All right, this is submitted by a community leader.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to hear a clear vision for Huntington Station that includes diversity and opportunity for its current and future residents. Does any candidate have a vision for the station?
You know, I think having been the superintendent of the station being
yeah.
part of my district,
Yeah.
I mean, I love the station. And we recently were awarded, not recently, this was a couple of years ago, the $10 million revitalization grant.
Yes.
Where, you know, and I'm always worried when we get those grants that, like, what are we going to do substantially with them?
Right.
Like, there has to be some value added at the end.
Yeah.
And whether it's improving the facades of the buildings, I think that's critical in a lot of cases to use grant money for that. I think you can use grant money to seed, to help people get started in businesses, diverse people, people of color, people who are underserved communities. I think it works for that. I think it works for making sure that we have protections in areas that, in other words, they're safe, although the station has become very safe. So, you know, that used to be a big concern,
Yeah.
but it really is a different station than it was when people were. But the two things are improving the economic viability through the grants and improving the opportunity to participate in that economic viability through the grants. So the people that live there can be shop owners there. The people that live there can get jobs there. And that, to me, that's the vision for the station. It's I have to say, it's well on its way to that. I do believe. I think that, you know, from the time I was a principal in Harborfield to the time I finished being superintendent in South Huntington, the station had taken on a very different, positive tone and character.
Yeah.
You know,
We
some of it,
started that.
it really has. I mean,
We
that
really
and still going. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about it, this year we lit the Christmas tree there. You know, and there are things that have become that you don't have to whisper the station anymore. You know, you know, you can say, well, the station, it's great. You know.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to say in South Huntington too. You know, the community's changing. I'm like, really? You know, like, you know, what are we doing? You know, it's diverse and beautiful, and the station is a great place. But our job in any community is to, if we do have those funds available, to use them. I always think that grant funding is like shock paddle on a chest. It's not going to save you, but it can get the heart going.
Right.
And we have to use that as seed money to help get participation.
Yeah, that's great. And then, I mean, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative projects have been selected by the state.
Yep.
So there is, and we have the sewers starting.
Sewers are
very
starting.
soon
Sewers
in
are gonna be
Huntington
huge.
Station.
Yep.
This is my neighborhood now I'm talking about. That's going to be huge.
Yep.
And that's going to enable all those properties along that new sewer district to do improvements that they've never been able to do before because the lot size has been too small.
That's our prayer. Yep.
To be able to do anything, even update what they currently have, because now it no longer fits town code, you know, the county requirements.
Well,
They
that's how
even
we
touch
can help
the way
too.
It is now.
We can help by, I believe in searching out every available fund we can get to helping people with meeting some of those requirements. In other words, and again, not taxpayer money. There's a way to do it. We used to do this with the schools, right? We used to get different Title I money, and there's money out there that you bring it in and you help people. They won't need you forever. It's just a shock. It's just a boost up, and then they start giving back to the system, and that's got to be the way. The sewers are a huge part of it. Facade revitalization has to be part of our plans at some point. Big part of it.
And then, like, I do understand the depth of this question that came in because, like I said, it is my neighborhood, and this is a neighbor that did submit it. And the concern is that, you know, we're so excited that we're getting these projects and we're getting these beautiful C6 buildings coming in, and so much more housing opportunity will be there. Again, you know, the pricing and all that. but we're very concerned about our existing business owners that will have to be displaced
Right.
to create that. Our existing families that are living in those buildings that are there now and that are at an affordable rate, that now that building's getting knocked down and something else that they'll never be, it seems like they're never going to be able to attain a retail space.
I hate that piece of it.
That's the concern.
Yep. Look, that's why I
Because
fear.
these are families here. We don't want to drive them out of their hometown, and they are part of the beautiful fabric of Huntington Station that makes it such a special place to live, and end up pushing them out because of this development. So we have to make sure the board is keeping an eye on that.
And the
for
CDA is a great
Yes.
group to help us make sure, because
We have to make
look,
sure.
again, being a bit of a libertarian, I cringe when I hear eminent domain. I cringe when I hear
Yeah.
people are going to be, and I understand the greater good, and I understand there never would have been a Brooklyn Bridge. I get all that, but by the same token, the whole concept of America is, you can't tell me I have to leave here.
Right.
And I so believe that. So I think that that's another place where we do have to put our hand on the scale a little bit through our CDA and see what can we do for these people.
like incentivize
I think it's important.
something, even working with the new property owners.
I think that's critical.
Because these projects are going to come through the town board.
They're going to need us.
They're going to come through for other authorizations, and if that's something that you guys can consider now, before the sewers are finished, it'll take 5 years for the sewers to get completely finished. Before there's a shovel in the ground on these new buildings, if you can have some kind of a program in place that helps support the existing businesses,
Yeah, that's a very good
really
idea.
innovative and help us get going in the right direction, which is what the revitalization was intended for.
Yep. No, that's a great point, and that's something we have to keep. You're stimulating my thought on it a lot right now,
Yay!
which is actually important, and that's something I'm going to jump on.
And we're happy that you did allow the underground parking, not underground, sorry, first floor parking in that zone, because the lot sizes are so small. Most of them are not going to be able to comply with the parking requirements that the town has for C6 buildings, blah, blah, blah. So that was a good foresight, doing that now before even they're ready to put a shovel in the ground. So let's get
that
this
was
other
Ed's
piece.
thought. Yeah, I give Ed credit on that one.
I didn't even think of it.
Yep.
I was thinking they were going to buy the residential neighborhoods and bulldoze them, honestly. Bulldoze the houses and turn them into parking. But this is better. Again, now you're preserving the neighbors.
Yep.
So that's right. Okay. All right. Almost done with Huntington Station. You ready? Conti Center.
Yes. So
What is happening? We are talking about the Armory at Manor Park.
it's been going on forever.
Has been going on forever. I think we're in over 20 years that was named as the Conti Community Center, and it was supposed to be rebuilt or renovated to be a community center, and it is still sad.
Yeah, it's a can that seems to be kicked down the road from administration to administration.
Yes.
And, it's funny, Matt Harris and I were talking about this. It really, for 2.5 years, never even really came across my desk, interestingly enough. And then Matt started talking to me a couple months ago about it, and I started to dig a little deeper, and then I saw that, the money they had budgeted, every year you wait with inflation the way it is, but you're able to do less and less. So that's a place where I think perfect is the enemy of good. I think that, how can we get back to the original concept? Well, maybe never, because the money you have is a third of what the original concept was, but let's get something going. And I actually was talking to Ed a couple hours ago about this. Let's get something going, and it's not a place for us to house equipment. That's not what it's for.
What it is now.
It's with what we have, what can we get the community?
Is there still $8 million sitting in the piggy bank?
I have.
Did all that expire? Because we got grants and there's expiration dates on those grants.
And that's what this was a couple hours ago. I was talking to Ed about it. What I want to find out, and what I'm going to now kind of make a mission is, what is available, what's there,
Right.
and what can we do with it?
Right.
And then, are there private funds that want to come in, public-private partnerships, which they become a little more complex, but build it, they will come. Let's get something going.
Yeah.
Whatever that something is, and then let's get the choo-choo train going of people wanting to get into public-private
Because the
partnerships.
neighborhood, they've had so many improvements. That's now not the flagship anymore, which it would have been for the revitalization of the park. And we have a beautiful park, we have a beautiful spray park,
great area,
gorgeous playgrounds, great basketball courts, and we just need this. Which
No,
is
that's
just like a dump. And then on the other side is beautiful Avalon,
yeah.
and we have this zit.
No, that's going to be, and I had made that commitment to Matt when we chatted about it also, that that's going to be a place that, if I'm blessed enough to be back with the board, I'm gonna be a pest about that.
He will. Before he dies,
He'll make that happen.
He will cut a ribbon at that center.
He's gonna be the first one with the scissors.
Absolutely.
Honestly, those are the type of things that, if I'm able to help there, that's why I run to do something like that. So I have to be brutally honest.
Yeah.
Until we talked about it a couple months ago, I truly, I remember going maybe I was a principal. Remember when we first went and John Flanagan was there and we had the big ceremony? It had to be 15, 18 years ago. And Dee was there, and God, it was a who's who. And then I'm almost embarrassed that it kind of came and went, and I never even really gave it a say. I never really followed it because I wasn't in the town government at the time. But now in town government, why didn't I do something the past 2.5 years?
And nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, and why didn't I do something the past 2.5 years? I asked myself that, so that's something I want to fix.
Well, I have to say, I was very glad to delete the other question that was on the list for 10 years, which was, when are we getting a spray park in Huntington State?
I love that spray park.
So I was able to remove that. So if we could finally remove that, hopefully we'll be able to remove the the community center. All right, Melville Town Center. So I broke it down into specific points that are confusing because there's tons of contradictory information out there. And we ended up doing an initial interview with Ed Smyth when you guys were first exploring this whole thing and proposing it. We did a sit down with him, but we know it's changed since we did that sit down. So, brief explanation of where the Melville Town Center is. Okay. And what the overlay district is, because it's a brand new district, right?
Yep.
It's brand new creation, and how it affects the existing zone of the properties in that district. Let's start with that. Okay,
so, in very general terms, I think of the Melville Overlay District now in its current form with no outer ring. There was an idea of an outer ring. And the inner ring,
So 178 acres.
So right? you figure Maxis Road area, go down to the quadrangle. Talking about that general area. And whenever anybody asks me, I say that general area.
Right.
Of course, that's not GPS, but it's and people are able to visualize. Okay, now I know what you're talking about.
Take a drive, Maxis Road. You have to do it to really get it.
That's exactly what happened. And when you do it,
and
then go into the quadrangle, and you start to feel what we're talking about.
Figuring it out,
All an overlay district did, and this is where, unfortunately, it became political and it became a campaign hot football. But all the overlay district did was say, you can now bring us ideas. No project has been approved. The overlay district is not a project. It's simply an overlay of permission to bring us projects. And the thought is something where a building, say there's a 3-story building there now, they'll probably knock many of them down because I've learned now just recently repurposing buildings is probably more expensive sometimes than knocking them down.
Yeah, my husband told me all about that.
I have no idea about that.
Yeah, and also the fact that they're so low and spread out, that why they could do it in the city is because the footprint is much more compact when you're going vertical, because state laws require a certain number of windows for the rooms. So if you have a building that's shaped like this, you can have units here and here, unit here and here. They have the required windows because it's like this. But if you have something that's 1 floor or 3 and it's this, you're never getting enough windows.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know that.
You have the corner little bits. That's it. And then you think, let's make a courtyard then in the middle. Let's gut the whole thing, make a courtyard like a 50s murder motel where every horror movie takes place. But make a courtyard in the middle, but then it's like, who's living there and getting shade, and this one doesn't like that, and and then again the cost, because now you're gutting half the footprint.
So apparently, whether they keep the buildings or knock them down, the thought was, you see this in Naples a lot, the first floor being boutique retail. You're not talking about Amazon. Boutique retail, and by boutique I mean a small gym, an AT&T shop, a flower shop, a deli. Boutique retail, dry cleaner, which still do have. Those are the four or five businesses I've mentioned. Those are still the ones that exist regularly in places.
Right.
They're not being replaced. So, and then housing in, say, the second or third floor to feed that retail
Okay.
and and then a green space in that area, and
because that's a requirement of
Exactly.
the framework of the overlay.
so
district.
kind of live,
Okay.
work, play. The concept is, those are the ideas we opened it up to.
Right, right.
Have we seen an idea officially yet? No.
So has anything been submitted?
There is no submission
And
at this
when
point.
was it approved? It was approved in like December, right?
Was it December?
Was it
God, I
December?
still have the battle wounds. It must have been around
I think
then.
it was
Yeah.
before the new year,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it was, maybe November?
Actually, yeah. God.
I know.
It feels like 4 or 5 months ago.
I know, we were wounded too. So it's 5 months and nothing's been
Nothing.
submitted
And
yet. Okay.
when it comes
know.
before us, those developers, that developer, they have to do their own environmental study at their expense. Now, an environmental study,
That's that secret study
yeah,
we were talking about.
that on an area like that, on an area like Villadon, would be $1 million. So they have to do their own environmental study with the understanding that there's a good chance that we might not accept what they do. So these are high risk, high reward, but high risks. So you got to do your environmental
So
study.
they'll have to invest in the environmental study just to even bring the proposal to the town board for their project.
Before we even talk about whether
All
we
that
vote on something.
has to be done in place first.
Before we
Okay.
vote on anything, yeah.
Now, one of these questions, jumping ahead, with
Okay.
the secret study. So, I'm not sure about this though. What we know, the secret study is the environmental impact study of.
We did a
whatever
general
you're
one on
planning.
the area.
So that's what I'm asking.
And it's been online
Okay.
since,
So
been online a while.
there is a general secret study for the whole footprint
Yep.
of the overlay
Yeah,
district.
very general. But
And that was what you were required, the town was required to do? You had to submit it to New York State or something like that to get the overlay?
well, we would have done it anyway. In other words, we just wanted to do a general understanding of, is this even something we should be talking about? Now,
Okay.
you have to then bring us the more in-depth secret study at your cost if you
Right.
want to build there.
Right.
You have to bring us, I'm going to ask for a traffic study. I'm going
Right.
to ask.
Well,
So
that's all part of it,
there
yeah,
are
right?
things that we're going to ask for. I'm going to ask for what's your impact upon the school district, for example. I'm never voting for things with 3 bedrooms or more because first, it's supposed to be first step housing and not supposed to be forever housing. Second of all, I have no desire after spending 40 years in public education to drain resources from a school district. So to me, there are a bunch of things that have to be done before anything comes to us, and then a bunch of thresholds that have to be met. And Ed might have a couple different ones. But I know that
And each town board member has a vote.
has the vote, and so to
Okay.
get the 3, you got to please a lot of people.
So they have to get 3.
Well, no, actually, if it becomes, I think they got the supermajority rule, so it'll be 4. Yeah. So
They
to
would
get the
have to
4,
have
let's
4,
say,
right?
you have to
Yeah.
really, So this is going to go through such a funnel that it's going to have to be almost perfect to get there. But that was the goal.
Right.
And so,
Right.
like I said, I envision things with mostly 1 bedrooms, some 2s,
Right.
because those do not produce children. It's a statistical truth, and the whole concept that but 4 will go in a bedroom. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
This is not what happens.
And there's also state occupancy laws.
Yeah, we're not
per
gonna.
square foot,
If
yeah.
if it did happen, they'd be doing it now.
Right.
We'd be doing it now in some of these great school districts we have. So to me, those are the thresholds. I'm also very big on, I do not like tax breaks that impact the school district. In other words, to me,
Oh, right. Okay, so that's one of the questions.
Yep.
Can the Melville Town Center projects receive IDA tax breaks? Because when Ed and I talked, he said no, it doesn't even qualify.
well, you can go to the IDA. It's the county, but
The town has to sign off on it, right?
I think we have to give a recommendation. I don't think we have to sign off. And that's where I'm going to be a stickler, in that I have a real problem with you looking me in the eye and telling me that, I lived through tax breaks. I lived through pilots. I know what they are as a superintendent. And they become draining to a school district for 2 reasons. Number 1, the decreased tax revenue. But number 2, the way the state tax cap formula goes, you're actually penalized for a pilot. It's a subtraction formula.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
See,
Jim,
we wouldn't have this, most candidates don't have that perspective.
and Jim Polanski and I used to scream about it, constantly, because Jim had a lot more than I did in Huntington.
Yeah.
But so to
He has a
me,
village. Ugh. Wow.
and those pilots. So to me, and the third thing tax breaks like that do is they create an us against them mentality with people in the surrounding area. In other words, well, then why am I paying this? You know, and you know what? They're not wrong. So the abatements or tax breaks, they exist. For example,
To incentivize development.
business, to incentivize recurring business. So, for example, I remember when the mall, Simon Mall, asked for a tax break, and the South Huntington community wanted me to go crazy, and the truth is that they were able to show me mathematically how, as the tax break abated, those stores would bring in so much more tax revenue that within 3 years we'd end up plus. And you know, they did it. They did it beautifully. They sat right down. They laid it out for me. You know, so I
That was the expansion. Right?
That was the expansion.
That's right.
And
Wow.
it did everything they said it would do. Eventually, the tax breaks abated away, and the tax revenue skyrocketed from that area. You know, the rumor was they pay nothing. None of that stuff was true. But before I could look my public in the eye there and say, first of all, they didn't care. You know, Simon Mall didn't really care what Dave Bernardo thought anyway. I'll be honest with you. They were courteous, but they were going to do what they were going to do. But before I could say that I wasn't going to kick my feet with the county, you know, with the IDA, they had to show me. I don't know. I don't think that holds with apartments. I don't see the same equation. I don't see the same business being generated, you know? So unless I'm dead wrong...
That means that that's outside the parameters.
It's really outside what I think should be the parameters.
Of the IDA anyway.
And I would think
it's supposed to
generate business. Now,
generate
someone
jobs.
could argue, you know, it generates building, but eventually that stops.
Right.
And so, you know, I would... And then look, I might ask a developer to look me in the eye and say, you can certainly, after I vote yes, go to the IDA. I can't stop you from exercising your legal right. But look me in the eye and say, if you want to do business with us, that you're not going to do that. I might do that.
Right. So can a Melville Town Center property in that center proper strip, can it be all housing and no commercial?
We
on the
asked
first
for
floor? You want some retail on
we
the
asked
first
for
floor?
a certain percentage of retail. We thought that was very important because we wanted a live, work, play community. We didn't want just apartment buildings.
And then I'm just skimming our questions here. We touched on pretty much most of it.
I talk too much, so.
No, this is great. It's great. So we can find that overall area secret study online?
Yep, the tab's right on the town website.
So, okay.
Well,
I'm not
because
even going
why
there.
were people concerned?
No.
Because it wasn't
I
an
understand, but
there
why
was
are
one.
people claiming that there was no study?
There was definitely a study. It was a tertiary study for sure because we weren't going to...
Because there's no plan.
There's no plan. In other words...
It's possible that nobody will ever come in with a project
that gets approved. Absolutely possible.
or even interested to approach you with the project because
Absolutely.
don't they also have to pay their own to hook up to the sewers and everything?
Yes, and that end, like I said, the risk reward. I was actually talking to a developer the other day who was upset with me over my whole position on tax breaks, and he said, "Dave, do you realize 4 out of 5 of my projects that I pay for a CEQA right all across the country go belly up?"
4 out of 5.
Yeah, he
so it's a big
said we
investment.
really
Yeah.
have to plan for the studies to go belly up in 4 out of 5 times. Now, my argument is, but I can't subsidize your going, you know, your 4 or 5. I'm not holding a benefit for you. That's not really happening. But so it's possible that someone comes to us and says, with what you people have, we can't do this.
Right, this is a unicorn.
This is too, you're too restrictive.
Right.
But I'm also not ready to surrender on the things we promised the community that are restrictive. I'm not ready to do that, you know, and so we'll see. We'll see if, look, I'm a believer in American capitalism. Mm-hmm. Someone out there will figure out a way to make money doing it the way we're asking. Mm-hmm. I am convinced someone will do that.
And once someone submits a project, does the community get to have a say?
Then you have the whole hearing process again.
The public hearing process.
All starts again, Lord help us. And yeah, it really does. I mean, it all happens again. And by the way, all kidding aside, good. You know, in other words, they have to go through the scrutiny of it, the spotlight of it. I will argue. I'm going to demand for an exchange.
And this is unique to the Melville Town Center, correct?
Well, any project that
requires a zone change.
So,
But
but
this
we're
isn't
making
a
everything
zone change.
technically. So we're making everything. And that was a big piece from Ed. Ed wanted us.
That's very interesting.
Ed wanted that So we were ultimately responsible for whatever was built.
Because I think the Huntington Station redevelopment after the sewers, we're not going to get public hearings for every one of those projects, right?
You know, I don't know that. I don't want to answer.
I don't think that we are. I think some of them, but I don't think, because some of them are already, as of right, very large parcels.
Well, then
and
they will.
They can do whatever they're going to do. But even in this case with Melville Town Center, every project has to go by the town board.
Now, Ed, it's funny. Ed and I actually at the beginning disagreed on this.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a choke point, to be honest.
And he said, okay.
Yeah.
And you know, he convinced me. I said, Ed, you know, we may never getting done then. He said, okay. He said, but we have to shine a light on it, Dave. And we actually disagreed for about 2 weeks, and I came back and I said, you've got a great point. If we're going to do something this monumental, this huge, it's got to go. It's got to stand up to public scrutiny.
And maybe, hopefully, we won't get these bizarre design oddities that happened in the village because there was no continuity like that, and it was just put through the planning board, whatever, zoning board, because they could do things as of right. And then you have this funky.
And it's funny, enemies,
going on.
public, you know, political enemies of the overlay district saying you're not allowed to tell people what they can build. Troy can. It's called yay or nay. In other words, it's very simple. I can't tell you what you can build, but I could just vote no until you agree that it's going to match the facade of the area. So that's what Ed envisioned when he argued that. No, Dave, we have to keep it with us because we're the ones that get voted in and out of office. So it has to be that type of public scrutiny. And so, you know, for example, I'm going to say to whatever person comes to the microphone with a thought project, have you sat with the school district? Have you met with the school district? Have you sat with the board president? Have you, whatever, you know, have you done that? And obviously, I'm going to want to be there because I'm going to want not to participate necessarily, but to make sure it's done. So that's one of my acid tests. So everyone's got a different acid test or two, and but someone will come up with an idea that's pretty cool. I just know it. And I might have to give on one or two of my things, but I know what I won't give on, that's for sure.
And if a project is submitted today, in your estimation, how long do you think it would take for the building to be fully built? Melville Town Center.
Fully built, I don't know because I know nothing about building.
Right. But from what
shovel in the ground?
Yeah.
You know, you think if a project came to us next month, say, and I'm not saying there's one pending next month, but if a project came to us in July, we would have to have planning take a look just to start the process. Say we got it on the agenda to set a hearing in September. The hearing would be October. My guess is it would probably be 2 hearings, October, November, or maybe 3. But then,
yeah, 90 days.
The beginning of the year, the beginning of the new year, there could be a shovel in the ground if something went through all of those processes and sailed through with no hiccups.
That would be absolutely no bumps in the
road.
No bumps in the road.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. And then what would the impact of the maximum 1,500 Melville? I don't know that you could even predict this, but what would the impact of the maximum 1,500 Melville Town Center apartments drawing on our sole source aquifer be on the Bethpage plume to the west?
I can't predict this. I know that, and I just don't know enough about the plume. I do know that I'm going to ask for a water study, and I'm going to ask for, sit with Adrian and speak with a couple other people who are experts in this, as well as scientists involved. And I'm going to be very protective of that one piece. I think it can be done, but I don't know enough to answer because I don't know what's being built. I don't know what they're,
Right.
It's
and
a big
then you
unknown.
Have the whole entire.
Are they all in one spot? Are they all? Yeah, exactly.
Like this property can do whatever it wants and whatever it wants, and then what's that impact going to be there?
Exactly.
Yeah, right. I get you.
So I don't want to, while I'm very comfortable answering things about taxation, I don't want to pretend to be an expert in water.
Good point. Good point. Okay, parking. We have to get this. I know we are way over time, but
that's okay. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm okay with it. Huntington Village parking issues. Neighbors are constantly asking for a parking garage in town. What are your thoughts?
I actually love the idea of a parking garage, and I think they could be done in a way that it doesn't look like an urban parking garage. I've seen some models across the country now that they look beautiful. They almost look like a house.
Yeah.
I love the idea. I guess the question would be, where would we get the land? But to me, if we had the land, that would be a good use of some of our reserve money to
So you don't think like Elm Street lot or New Street lot is a good spot?
It could be, yeah. It could be. The question becomes.
Then you go up.
The question becomes up. How much up can the public tolerate?
Right, and then you would be taking away current spots
to go up.
to go up.
Yeah.
So are you increasing spots?
How many stories do you have to
with
go to increase
that
spots, and then how high do you want a parking garage in town?
investment?
That's my
Right.
one.
Right,
I think
right,
that's,
right, right.
and again, now I'm just presupposing because I wasn't around, but I think that's
Yeah.
probably what's held it up all these years. Is that in theory it's wonderful, and in theory we would love it,
What
but
about underground?
I was about to say to you,
And why don't we do anything underground?
why
I mean,
wouldn't
I'm-
underground would
I
be
don't want to get
sweet?
slammed, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Because underground seems like a good solution. You could do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, we are pretty close to the water table, but I don't know. Oh, she's saying no. Oh, she's saying
Dana
no.
says no.
Dana says no.
No.
It's out. All right. Is there an alternative to the passport parking app for our senior residents? As
Yes, I hate it.
some have suggested a senior parking sticker with a flat annual fee
I love
instead
that.
that exempts them from having to use the app.
I love that. You know, look, my mom's, she stopped shopping there because she didn't want to use the app.
Yeah.
You know, I hate apps. So
Yeah.
you know, and I'm only 59, and I hate apps. So you know, so I will argue that we absolutely need to do a pass of some sort that seniors can get that exempts them from this. And anyone can get if they choose, that exempts them from this. Because, you know, what happens is if you're into technology, you'll say everyone's using apps. And that's great, but everyone isn't using apps. There's no
Right,
everyone doing
right,
anything.
Right.
So I am
right. So, like, if you have somebody, I'm jumping ahead in my brain, thinking about the monetization of it and the revenue streams. So, if you know, right now you have a senior that's not going at all, and then if you give them something that's like $40 for the year.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm
That's
thinking.
currently about 38 hours of parking.
Right. And someone should be able to amortize that and get a break point where if this is how many times the typical person shops or goes to dinner, and the break
Right.
point, and give them a little bit of a break under that. You know, our traffic engineers should be able to do that.
And it doesn't mean they're going to get a guaranteed spot either.
No, that I can't assure them.
We
You
don't
know.
have a parking garage.
But you know, I've been the thorn in a lot of sides when the parking ideas come, when the meter
Yeah.
changes come up, because I just, being a non-tech guy,
Right.
I know how I want to go to the kiosk. I want to put the thing in, you know, and
Are
I
there any kiosks left?
you know, I've been told we kept some kiosks. Yeah,
I mean, you'd have to be are you willing to walk 2 blocks to find the kiosk?
yes, see, I would,
You would.
because I just hate apps so much, but I don't know that the average person would. And I have this vision of, you know, in Florida you got the app, and I remember having to sit there and you got 8 people around the kiosk trying to figure out the app, and but I do know that a lot of people love it and say it's the easiest thing in the
Yeah,
world.
it's very easy.
Yep.
It is. I tech phobic, Dr. BENNARDO. The app is very easy.
Okay, I'm gonna grow. I'm gonna mature.
You set up your vehicle. You just put in the license plate number, and you put in your payment method, and then you look at the pole, and it gives you a zone number, and you go in the app and you go new parking session. Type in the zone number. Done.
I'll take your word for it.
It's easy.
I'll
It's
give it a
not that
shot.
bad. We'll do a video about it. It's nothing to fear. But if you're a senior and maybe you don't even have a cell phone, or maybe
Yep.
you have something going on that.
Then they get nervous with the cell phones.
Right, exactly. All right, great. So, do we want to keep going? We have 2 more. Do you want to keep going?
I'm fine.
Okay. So, environment. Homeowners have major flooding issues from rainstorms here in Huntington, causing tremendous damage to the point that our collective homeowners insurance rates have soared with fewer providers available. Did you know that?
Yes.
Geico dropped everybody but one.
Yes, that I did know.
Yeah,
That.
so we're stuck with the one. What flood prevention solutions do you propose?
So there are 2.
Because it's something that can be done.
Yes, there are 2. And the first one I learned actually when, unbeknownst to me, I learned that as a superintendent of schools, South Huntington owned a sump. And
Really?
yeah, in the back of
Oh, in that neighborhood over there.
the back of God,
Like Livingston and
the back of the
Norwich.
gifted school for the gifted,
Oh,
back of the library.
wow.
We
okay.
own some back there, and basically when it would flood, it would go into the neighbor's basement. And
So when the sump floods.
yeah, so what I learned was one of the first ways to mitigate flooding is by good sump control. It's got to be the silt. You know, sumps to get a certain degree of silt, they have maybe a 20-year and that number I'm making up, but
Yeah.
20 year lifespan until you got to scrape them. It's very expensive, but you scrape them, you cut back the brush, and that's largely what sumps are for, to
Be
collect
like
water and be
filtration.
like filtration. That's number one. Number two,
And like things are tipped to the sump.
yes, and that's supposed to be the
Okay.
concept. So
I'm just getting this.
Andre has made a commitment to.
He's been doing it.
He's been
right?
doing it. He's also been
wasn't
clearing
John
out.
in the sump with him last year.
Yeah.
Or 2
Oh
years
yeah,
ago?
and he's been
Jesus.
clearing out the drains.
Yeah.
He's been, that's huge. We're finding those are the man-made things we can. Well, those are the
the
mechanical things
drains
we
are
can do.
He was telling me some of them are cinder blocks
Yes.
and they're disintegrating when they try and clean them.
So
could we do more drains?
well, when what Andre's doing is when he's not working roads, he's working drains.
Right.
And the question is, and I know he's looking at it. How do you add more drainage?
Right.
And in a safe way too, where you're not hurting the water tables. So yes is the answer, but the question is I don't know enough about how yet. So right now we're hitting it from the maintenance standpoint. We're hitting it from the cutting back
good
the
idea.
stumps, cleaning the silt off the bottom so you get real drainage, and cleaning the drainage grates. We're hitting the maintenance problem.
And I think there was some Garrett when we went out on the boat with Garrett. He was talking about rain garden catchment, like
Yes,
the
yes.
stones,
Yep.
like things like that, where not everything has grass.
Yeah, he explained that to me. That was a really good idea.
It's a
Yep.
good idea.
Yeah, it looks like
And then
grass,
it
but it's
catches runoff, and it has like strategic, like a bench plantings, whatever. But in reality, it's like just a drainage
Yep.
spot.
And each of those things is a dribble, but a lot of dribbles together can come out
Yeah.
to help.
yeah.
Now look,
Interesting.
we're
And someone else, I don't want to cut you off,
okay.
recommended raising the curb height. But we have a lot of neighborhoods that don't have any curbs.
Yeah, I never
Like
thought of the curb height.
raising
Is
the
that
curb height to prevent the water from
But then
flooding
the house
people's
floods.
lawns.
We were looking at that with the storms this weekend, and we saw some people that had put up Belter block curbs.
Okay.
Which I don't know if that's okay, but anyway. And then their lawn was flooded.
really?
Yeah.
That's
because
interesting.
it wasn't draining.
It
didn't go the other way.
It can't
Yeah.
drain out.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I needed Lancey on my husband. He would have been like, no. All right, I won't even suggest that again. All right, good.
Nature's tough to tell what to do.
It is very tough. Okay, this last one, I kind of clumped everything into one question. Quality of life issues that repeatedly come up at the second precinct community meetings are the huge number of vape shops, foot spas, speeding traffic issues, and loud music and noise complaints in the summer months. What ideas do you have to address these issues?
Okay,
That's a lot.
that's okay. We actually have a public hearing, I think, scheduled for tomorrow on the vape shops. We're increasing the amount of space between vape shops that are allowed, the amount of space between vape shops and schools and churches, how close they can be to each other, and increasing the fines. So we're look, it's a legal business, whether we
Right.
like it or not. So what happens is you can put more
Well,
restrictions
ish,
on a legal
depends
business.
on what they're
Ish,
selling.
right. Well, that's where the fines come in. If they're
Yeah.
not doing right, then we got to blast them. So we want to increase the amount of space between them, and we want to increase the fines. So those are the two ways we're allowed to monitor and maybe decentivize more of the businesses.
Okay.
Noise is interesting. Noise, I do believe, because I've heard on the campaign trail from a lot of people this issue.
It's a huge
We
problem.
need better, and that's a staffing issue. I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
We need better availability to respond to complaints on the spot in the evenings.
Yes.
So what happens is typically.
Between 10 and 2 a.m.
That's when the noise complaints come in. So it doesn't matter that we have someone in during the day, because typically you don't have your party at 2 in the afternoon.
Right.
But so we do have to hit that, and that's on us, because really the police, it's not on them to stop a loud party. The speeding's on them,
Right.
but
The current deputy inspector has zero tolerance for repeatedly having to come back with police resources to a loud thing. That's what he said when he himself
They're
was
very
an
good
officer.
people.
However, that is not the departmental,
it's also they have limited.
and they have limited resources
and
that
lots of
may
crime.
not be
Well, they don't have
exactly
lots of
what
crime.
the individual officers are doing, and let's be honest, it takes them 4 hours sometimes.
And we want
come
the
and
cops
knock
to
on
fight
their
crime,
door.
so we want to hit we have to do a better job. That's a
Yeah.
place that I'm getting from everyone out there.
Good.
We have to do a better job with the noise complaints. You know, this whole idea of teach everyone to be a better neighbor, that would be great.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
And we got to be better at the stick.
Yeah. And then the foot spots. Now,
I don't know much about.
I have an idea, but I've said it before, but only, and this didn't come from me. This came from actually a member who was dealing with one next to her commercial business, and it was years ago. Village of Babylon, I think it is.
Okay.
Village of Babylon their town requires any massage profession to have every employee's license filed
To make sure they're really masseuses.
with the town. So if you don't have a massage license, you can't operate a massage premise.
Or be an operator on a massage.
Correct. In their town. So
That's
cut way
seems like an
down
easy
on
lift.
their foot spa things.
That seems like an easy lift.
It does. I have mentioned it about 75 times over 8 years,
Little bit,
but
yeah.
that's okay. But we're working on this together.
Why
We got
haven't
this.
Why haven't I thought of that? Yeah,
Well, I actually was talking a lot in the last cycle to our state reps.
Okay.
Also about it, about making something at the state level that mandates that,
Mm-hmm.
so that all communities, because it's just whack-a-mole at this point. And my other big concern is not just the disruption. They are very quiet neighbors.
Oh, they're quiet.
Yeah, very quiet with their brown paper on the window. But my issue is the human trafficking that happens as a result of those businesses.
Yeah, well, the licensing
So
thing
the
would take care of that.
people- Yeah, the individuals that are passed through them are usually victimized.
I want to run that by our
Heavily.
legal team and find out is that within our jurisdiction to do. We're just saying Babylon does it. Like, cool.
This is what I was told.
Okay,
So
well, I'll
you
ask
should
Richie. I'll call
check-
Richie Shaver. He'll tell us.
Check with them. Somewhere in the town of Babylon Villages. What?
They
Yes,
do.
they do. Oh, somebody commented.
All right, cool.
Oh, no, she researched it. That's Diane Shaver over there, research extraordinaire.
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so that I'm not outing her when she's no longer a business owner in the town, but she did phenomenal legwork to find that out. And I've been trying, you know who you are. Okay, great. So that's that, I think. And then in closing, what is your plan for Huntington's future? That's very open-ended.
No,
Deliberately.
to keep services. I want to be service oriented and I want to be customer oriented. And I said this when I was a principal, a superintendent, and now a council person. I think that sometimes bureaucracies, which towns are, schools are, they lose sight of the fact that we work for you and you don't work for us. And I think that that's a very, very important. So I want to continue because I do get that out there from people that we need to be a little more customer friendly. I think it's no secret that people think that. A lot do think certain areas are very customer friendly. So I think my goal
And
next.
we're talking as a town, every department in the town,
That's right.
not just the board. We're talking about when you go to this or that or that.
So I think my goal the next term would be to stress what are we doing to say how can we help you? What are we doing to be gateways instead of gatekeepers to services? So, and that's very big. And I did it in the schools. The first thing I did was take away you can't use this phone, you can't do this. Take away the reserved parking spaces. Those things send a message that we work for you. So number one is customer service. I want to do a better job than that. We have some wonderful people. We just need to set the tone, and we start with us setting that tone. Number two, a stewardship of the tax money. Every place I go, I'm hearing, Dave, we love it here, but we're dying. You're choking us.
Yeah, it's
and I get it. And look,
because you do that, even though you guys didn't pierce the tax cap, everybody's homeowners went up like
ridiculously.
I was like, oh my gosh, ours went up 700, and then I look in the group and someone posts in our group, theirs just went up 1,500.
Mine was going to be canceled because of moss on the shingles.
Oh, yeah.
I said, go clean the moss with the shingles. What do you get? But I think they were just looking to cancel me.
Yeah. And watch out if you have a trampoline.
Well, those days are.
They're
Well,
gonna
no, I got
drop
grandchildren
you.
now, but they hate trampolines
Oh,
and dogs.
they'll
They don't like
drop
dogs
you.
either.
Yeah.
So I think that continuing to do more with less without
Yeah. dropping
dropping services. Because let's be honest, we do like our services in the area. I
Yeah.
don't get complaints over the services. People don't tell me. I haven't heard, Dave, your sanitation's terrible. Your park. I'm not getting that. I'm
Right,
getting.
right.
it's just expensive, and is there any way you can do more with less? So that would be the second thing. And the third thing, which to me is critical, is to return some civility to the process. I think that it's critical, again, that we demonstrate in our relationships with each other and the public that this is the way to act, even if you don't agree. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes I'll be criticized. You just don't talk up there. Well, I'm not going to argue with the public. I'm not going to do that from the dais. I'll meet with you. I'll go to coffee with you. You can tell me I'm a knucklehead, whatever you want, but I'm not going to back and forth with you from a seat up there for 3 minutes of film footage. So I think the civility, the contemplation, that sometimes when someone's not yelling at you, either way, you can think. And with each other too. I think we have to do, I want to do a better job with each other of demonstrating the contemplation. Again, not blindly agreeing with each other.
Right.
That's not it. And that's unhealthy,
No, it's very bad.
And you don't want groupthink.
You want everybody to think the same.
But those are the three things I think that would be the visions for the next term. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure,
All right,
Dr. Bernardo.
It's my pleasure.
You.
Thank
we love
you.
these. I'm sorry we went over so much.
A little bit.
Just like, like an extra 40 minutes.
That's me talking. I could go.
It's okay. It's all good.
Thank you so much.
Next one is going to be Wednesday, the 11th, June 11th at 5 p.m. We will be interviewing Supervisor Ed Smyth, who is also up for re-election.
And who else?
And on Friday, the 13th, that's my problem, at 3:30 p.m., Greg Grisopoulos.
And everyone else was.
And everyone else
invited?
We did invite. We actually sent the invitation to all of the Republican and conservative candidates that are participating in this primary. And if you do not see a candidate interviewed, it is because they chose to not take advantage of the opportunity. And that's all we can do, is we give you the people that are willing to sit and talk to us. So that's that. All right. Peace out, guys. See you in 2 days.
Thank you all.
Thank you.